Hello everyone, welcome to yet another day in this The Clown Decade, the decade where things are only going to get worse before they get better. And today, I have no idea how this has happened. I genuinely don't know where my commentary is going to go. But yesterday there was quite the announcement that is making pretty much everyone on the right, and especially David Starkey, happy. And that is the news that Sue Gray, Keir Starmer's chief of staff, who before that was best known for being the civil servant that wrote the Partygate report that started the downfall of Boris Johnson, has, in less than 100 days of being Labour's chief of staff, after they got into government, has been sacked from the role, downgraded to another one, but we'll get into that. And thankfully the Times has an article, The Weeks of Dysfunction That Led to Sue Gray's Downfall. Sir Keir Starmer concluded that his chief of staff had become more of a liability than an asset at Downing Street, and we're going to go through the whole thing, because I just cannot believe... I thought Labour, at least for a year, would look somewhat competent, but by day 10... it was obvious they didn't know what they were doing. They didn't know what they were doing. They had no plan when they got in. They just wanted to get power, and now they have it. They're being thrown around by the media, by the civil service, by own factions within their party, like ragdolls. Keir Starmer is now more unpopular than Rishi Sunak. How do you manage that within 3 months? I don't know, but they have managed it. Let's get into it. So the end when it came was brutal. After weeks of support, both in public and in private, on Thursday, Keir Starmer summoned his Chief of Staff, Sue Gray, to see him in Downing Street. The Prime Minister told her that he had concluded that her position was no longer tenable and had asked her to resign. Gray is said to have proposed a compromise that would have seen her stay in a changed role, but this was rejected, and Simon Case, in one of his last acts as Cabinet Secretary, was dispatched to negotiate the terms for her departure. It's really not the way she would have liked it to end, said one friend. She was basically the victim of a coup, which has to be one of the most ironic things I think I've ever seen, given that she effectively set off the firing pistol for the coup against Boris Johnson. Another source said that Starmer took the decision to dismiss Gray almost 10 days ago, but delayed it to square off senior cabinet ministers who saw his chief of staff as an ally. In particular, Starmer was said to be nervous over how Angela Rayner, the Deputy Prime Minister, might react to the defenestration of the woman who had initially been her great patron, and the elevation of advisers who have often marginalised her. I'm not being funny, but if Sue Gray was mentor to Angela Rayner, again, that does not do well for her judgment. I mean, if you think Angela Rayner is worth mentoring, I don't know what to tell you. You do not understand what good statesmanship is. But in the end, senior figures said Starmer concluded that the only way to end the infighting in Downing Street was to act decisively, and that Gray had become more of a liability than an asset. He knew by the end of Labour's conference what needed to be done, but it took a little while to come together, said one government figure. The truth was that Sue had become the story, and it was unsustainable. While she was around there was no chance of him being able to reset things. And I really hope we get some insider details as to why Sue Gray was so hated, because from the news I've seen, all that seems to come out is, oh, some people hate her, but they don't really say why. And all that I can really glean from it is that she was a Starmer ally, and people don't like the fact there's someone very powerful in there who's actually an ally of Keir Starmer. But then in that case, why has he let her go so easily? I mean, within 100 days is very easily. There are people calling Starmer ruthless. This isn't ruthless, this is pure cowardice. This is an inability to control your team. And the easy way out of that is just to pick out the troublemaker and then try and make it work. But obviously everyone's saying, oh, well, it's impossible to actually make it work with Sue Gray. I'm sorry, I don't believe anyone who is in that position can be that bad and that uncompromising. But we'll only find out with detailed insight, which hopefully this article has. They brought in last September to help the leader of the opposition prepare for power. Oh, wow. Sorry. Help Starmer prepare for power, and this has been the result. She should never hold public office ever again. She should never be a civil servant again, but these people fail upwards, because I know what job she's got, you might not, but it's not the type of thing you would expect from someone who is a complete failure like this. She quickly put noses out of joint among the tight-knit group of advisers who had been operating with no boss but Starmer for almost a year, Tensions increased sharply when Gray instigated a Whitehall-style inquiry over how details of Labour's 28 billion green energy U-turn were leaked. Some staff complained that she had inspected their phones and interviewed several of them without a union representative present. Oh dear. The impeding election largely kept tensions in check, but they resurfaced in spectacular fashion in Downing Street. Almost from the off, Gray was accused of trying to marginalise Morgan McSweeney, Starmer's chief political advisor, and other senior political aides with whom she had clashed in opposition. She was accused of improperly trying to railroad through the bailout of a derelict stadium in Belfast, blocking one senior Starmer aide from entering Downing Street in revenge for orchestrating leaks against her in opposition and seeking to neuter the power of McSweeney in Whitehall. Right, so this is making an awful lot of sense. Why did people hate her? Because she was a power-hungry madwoman. Who, and Starkey said this an awful lot, this sounds exactly like the Stasi. This is exactly how I would expect political police representatives to act. She's interviewing and checking people's phones without their permission and without... It says union representative. It really means legal representation. She effectively thinks that she is the woman that can pick and choose who comes in and out of Downing Street when they're in power, and that does cause an awful lot of issues. There's a great Yes Prime Minister episode where Sir Humphrey is effectively banned from going into number 10 until he actually cedes some of his power. And effectively, that is a good way to deal with that without the public knowing. And yet, in this case, because it's all so public, Sue Gray has had to be fired instead, which is a much better outcome for those of us that absolutely hate her. One story forcefully denied by Gray and McSweeney was that McSweeney twice found that Gray had moved his number 10 desk, each time further away from the Prime Minister's office. That is exactly like the Yes Prime Minister episode, where the Downing Street secretary specifically had her desk placed so that she could see whoever was going up the stairs to the Prime Minister's office, so that she could effectively forewarn him whenever someone was coming up the stairs. But Sir Humphrey didn't like that, so had her desk moved further away. It's exactly like Yes Prime Minister. Honestly, some things never changed, and Yes Prime Minister and Yes Minister shocked me in how basically all the problems we have today are very similar to those we had in the 70s and 80s, which influenced Yes Minister and Yes Prime Minister. Relations broke down still further when figures in number 10 leaked details of Gray's £180,000 salary to the media amid claims that she tried to cut the pay of more junior staff. Yeah, everyone started complaining that she's making more money than the Prime Minister, which I saw some people saying, well, why should that matter? And the reason it matters is because what it implies is that Gray's job is more important than the Prime Minister's and that she has more power than the Prime Minister. And that makes people feel quite sick, I'd say, because the whole idea is that the Prime Minister is voted or appointed into his office via actually going through democratic parliamentary means. Sue Gray is just appointed there by effectively the party. Okay, it's the winning party, but still, people don't like the fact that when they're supposed to think that the Prime Minister is the leader of the country, he should really be making the most money in public office. And when he isn't, it makes people question what's going on. Despite the fact that the head of the civil service earns something like 200-something thousand pounds a year, which is way more than both of them, but the British public aren't really known for being consistent. Gray's allies insisted that she had the full backing of the Prime Minister and predicted that Starmer would choose to back his chief of staff over the leakers. But others said that Starmer had come to question her judgment too. I'll say so, she likes Angela Rayner. In particular, for nearly 2 months, Gray had been at loggerheads with political advisers over a choice of Principal Private Secretary of the Prime Minister, a vacancy that had been blamed for ongoing chaos in Starmer's office. As the Times revealed in August, Gray had been set on recruiting Daniel Gláeddyv from the Government Office for Investment, an old ally from her work with the Tory Minister Lord Maud of Horsham, to the crucial post. Her choice was fiercely opposed by others in Downing Street, who were suspicious of Gláedyv's links to Maud and other senior Tories. Wow. Starmer asked to see a broader range of candidates for the job. Why do these people think that, his connections to the Tories must mean he's a Tory? Do you really think Sue Gray, who, again, brought down Boris Johnson and helped Labour win the election, do you really think that she's going to let his Tory influence get through anywhere? Again, she's like the Stasi. She would never let that happen. Grey was reluctant, leaving the Prime Minister without a civil servant at his right hand, probably because she was at both his left and right hand. Keir was always of the view that he wanted to see more candidates, said a Downing Street source. Sue was not. Many in number 10 was similarly dismayed by the exit of John Boo, the foreign affairs expert and biographer of Clement Attlee, who had steered 3 Conservative Prime Ministers through the new era of global conflict. Well, thank God he's gone then. His return to academia this October was long planned, however, and unrelated to Grey. Okay, I don't know why they brought that up. Civil servants in number 10 were also said to have been increasingly frustrated at being sidelined by Grey, who had accused us of clamping down on access. Some of the Prime Minister's private secretaries are understood to have become demoralised, with being shut out of key meetings and refused sight of information central to their policy areas. Again, I've heard an awful lot of David Starkey talking about how Sue Grey is effectively a Stasi general. This is exactly the type of stories you would expect from a description like that. One Whitehall source said, there was a sense among those who've been there a while of the building not functioning in the way it should, and that not being very sustainable. A senior advisor to Starmer involved in forcing Grey's departure said that the Prime Minister had also come to the view that she, rather than his communications team, was the person ultimately to blame for weeks of negative headlines over donations, freebies, and the influence of the Labour donor Lord Ali over the government. I'm not being funny, but that is such a feeble excuse for that entire debacle. Labour MPs and Lords do really bad, corrupt things, and really, you're going to blame Sue Grey for not being very good with the PR? I don't think you can really blame her for that. I think no matter what PR team you have, you are not going to come out of it very well. I mean, she's gone now, so we'll see how good the PR gets, but I can't imagine it gets any better. Because frankly, the people we have in charge are idiots, and I do mean that. They can rote learn. That's about all these people's skills are, which means that they are very good at bleating platitudes. Having any sort of critical thinking skills, having any sort of foresight beyond like 2 weeks, if that, it is just impossible for them. Dominic Cummings said this about Tories. Labour seems to be actually worse when it comes to this sort of thing. There was no grid for the first 100 days, a senior government source said, and that was the one thing she was expected to be working on while everyone else was busy on the campaign. There was barely a single story about how the culture of government was being changed. And of course, there was a total lack of foresight or awareness about the criticism that would be coming down the pipe about the crony appointments, wealthy donors, freebies, all the stuff she assumed would be okay because the Tories had done the same thing. Unbelievable. This isn't just Sue Grey's attitude, by the way, that's just Labour in general. Oh, if we don't take as money as the Tories, then we can't be as bad as them. When, in reality, as I keep saying, it's actually worse, because that makes you more corruptible. If you are corrupt over, £1,000 of Taylor Swift tickets, that's actually worse than being corrupt over £60,000 of wallpaper donations. They're both bad, and I don't really care about the gap in badness between them. But the fact of the matter is, if your mindset is, oh, we can be corrupt because the Tories were, you are not fit for government. And the thing is that, fine, Sue Grey's not even out, as we'll say. She got another appointment. But it's not just Sue Grey that had this outlook, it was the whole of Labour. And this is why people hate them now. Starmer's new strategic communications chief, the former journalist James Lyons, will have responsibility for the Downing Street grid, and responsibility Grey had previously taken upon herself and apparently not done very well. So let's see if Lyons is any better. Sue was running the grid, but she wasn't running the grid. The process reported to her, but she just wasn't doing it, the advisor said. As much as Starmer has always loathed leaks and negative briefings from within his operation, another member of his inner circle has said he arrived at a basic recognition that Sue was clouding out coverage of everything else the government was doing. I don't even think that's true. I think Sue Grey was in the news for about half a week, and that was mainly just because of her pay. I don't think it was her clouding everything else out. And if that is the analysis that Starmer and the conclusion Starmer has come to, then he's going to be firing more people in the next 100 days. He just doesn't understand what the issue is. This is what I mean. They don't have any critical thinking skills. They just know how to bleat. They are sheep. We have sheep in government. How does that even work? When journalists from the Times and Sunday Times first inquired as to whether Lord Ali had been given a Downing Street pass, it was Grey who decided to withhold the crucial information that his access to number 10 had been temporary and the pass already returned. Why would that be withheld? That's good news. That means they're learning. That her colleagues say was a decision that needlessly elevated the story to the realms of a scandal. It was already a scandal, to be fair, but yeah, that's a ridiculous decision. I can't even understand why that would be withheld. In meetings at Downing Street, she shocked colleagues by openly referring to scumbag journalists. Okay, fair enough. Keir now has a private office operation that understands the political and presentational aspects of the job, a senior Number 10 source said. That can only be a good thing. I take it that means after Sue Gray was kicked out. I mean, I'm fine with her calling journalists scumbags. That's fine with me. But again, you would have thought that she knows how to play them, not just be a child and withhold every piece of information from them. You got to drip feed them stuff you want and withhold things you don't want them to know. Yet she was just withholding everything. What an idiot. Gray's allies reject this criticism and say that she has been the victim of an orchestrated campaign. The reason they have gone for her and that she thought too many of them were not up to the job, one ally said, she was trying to persuade the Prime Minister to bring people with proper experience of government, and that made her enemies. It was them or her. Ultimately, she was the victim of tribes of each other's throats. Others said, regardless of who was to blame, Starmer had little choice but to act because, in his 100th day in government looming, the media's analysis of his first months in power would be little more than a damning verdict on the division and dysfunction at the heart of his operation. I've been reading the Times comments on this because it's really fun for once to see them all having a go at Labour, rather than saying, oh, I'm fed up with Tories, oh, Labour must be better than this. There are people even saying that Liz Truss's government looked competent compared to this one, and that had everyone against her. Like, Labour is supposed to, well, does have The Guardian and Observer on its side, and Independent and other left-wing outlets, but even they are saying, we can't defend this. This is ridiculous. You know, they're going down the line of, oh, they're just Tories, but the reality is that it's just late-stage two-party systemism, I guess we can call it. This is just what happens. This is happening all over the world, by the way, where there's universal suffrage. This just seems to be what happens with low-information voter bases. They don't care about the information at all. Most of them are just tribal. They will have anyone in who has the right coloured rosette, and this is what you end up with. People that can't do the job but are just doing it for the paycheck, while people with actual skill are basically moving country. The amount of people I know that want to move to Canada, want to move to Australia, have moved to the US and Australia, in fact. People moving to Europe. People want to leave the island, and these people are people I know who I know have skill and talent. The people that stay in the civil service and want to go into politics within the main two parties, they are people, frankly, with little skill. Not necessarily unintelligent, but people whose critical thinking skills have only got them so far. It's good enough to get them a decent degree, but they're just lazy in everything they do. Everyone I know who works in the civil service probably works about 4 hours a week. That's probably an under-exaggeration, actually, but you get the point. They are quite lazy. And this is exactly the result of what we're seeing here. These people have no idea how politics works. They've probably, if they have read history, they probably, frankly, read a very woke version of history, for lack of a better term. One that doesn't tell them about real politics. One that instead tells them that the story of all of history is entirely down to materialism, and that the oppressed are always fighting oppressors, etc, etc, etc. Total nonsense, basically. And if your outlook on history is that, your outlook on the present is that, and this is how you end up with these stupid, moronic, useless people in government that think basically they can just do what they want because the Tories are worse than them. Well, guess what? Reality does not reflect that. Most people in Britain do not believe this story of history or the present, and you are suffering one of the most embarrassing governments that we have ever had. I don't see why we can't call this the worst government we've ever had. Obviously, I'm a simp for Liz Truss. I could understand why people are saying that's the worst government we ever had, though. Now, though, pretty much everyone apart from people in unions are saying that this is the worst government we've ever had. Why is that? Because this government is only helping out people in public unions. They are helping nobody else, and they look embarrassing to everyone else. Keir was always willing to make changes that are necessary to move this project forward, one said, and he was keen to do that for a glut of terrible pieces on his first 100 days. Yeah, well, this was an issue many people had during the campaign as well. He flip-flopped a lot. which can be spun into, oh, Keir reacts to public perceptions of him, this is a good thing, but nobody really bought that. Everyone just thought he was weak. And now people think he's weak again. There is nobody who has a nice thing to say about any of this Sue Gray stuff, any of the cronyism, anything like that. This is why they are the most disapproved government that we've had in the past, 20 years at least. Probably ever. But another questioned whether it would have the desired effect. He had taken a step toward putting things in order, but this basically amounts to backing his original team. It was probably necessary, but not necessarily sufficient. And that has been a quick rundown of exactly what has been going on over in Downing Street. But that's not all that there is to say on this. The Guardian also covered this entire debacle with a very long article. I'm not going to go through all of it. Just pick out the bit that the Times haven't mentioned. So after Starmer told Gray it wasn't working out, apparently they mutually agreed that she would have a new role as envoy for the nations and regions. Which, as most people, and I agree with them, have stated, this sounds like the sort of role that you just make up on the spot to make it slightly less embarrassing that she is effectively being sacked. And it's not stated here, but the Telegraph have reported that the salary for this job is £170,000 a year. So she is taking about a 10%, well, 5%, close to 5% pay cut for this job, but that is still obscene, and I'm pretty sure it's still more than Keir Starmer earns. It is in fact about £5,000 more than the Prime Minister is currently entitled to with his salary. And what the hell is an envoy for the nations and regions? I have no idea. The Prime Minister is kind of already the envoy for nations and regions, given he is the Prime Minister. But apparently the role would mean that Gray would be overseeing devolution and had emerged while the party gathered in Liverpool. It had taken the Prime Minister a couple of weeks to actually get a plan in place to get rid of her. Her new job is in many ways a good fit, given her previous experience in devolution and the fact she is well liked by the mayors. Several have told The Guardian their relationship with Starmer's office had been terrible until she came along last September. Gray will be at the Prime Minister's side as he hosts his first Council of Nations and Regions on Friday in Scotland. Ugh. She is expected to be given a peerage, meaning she can carry out her role from the House of Lords. Yeah, that's the other thing that's happened. Sue Gray is getting a peerage. Again, this is more of the stuff that Labour were complaining about with the Tories, that, it's all just cronyism, they keep giving their mates peerages in the Lords. This is the same thing. You've got to bear in mind as well that in their manifesto, what Labour want to do is get rid of peerages, reform the House of Lords to be a purely elected chamber. Why are they giving out peerages like this if they intend to get rid of them? That doesn't make sense. I don't think they're actually going to be getting rid of peerages and the Lords, because I think it gives them too much power. But we'll have to wait and see on that. But given that so far, throughout this entire government, it has been nothing but cronyism, lies, and pure incompetence, I wouldn't be shocked if that turns out to be another lie. But I just had to go through that because, effectively, yeah, she's been sacked, but she still has a major role in government, and she is also now going to be, probably going to become a Lord. She's not a Lord yet. And this is a great summary of the British state. You make your way upwards, you annoy absolutely everyone on the way, someone in one of the main two parties likes you, and so all you do is fail upwards. You actively make government worse, and you get rewarded for it, as long as you have the right connections. That should never be the way it works, obviously, but again, this is just late-stage two-partyism. I'm with Peter Hitchens, they both need to be destroyed. Join Reform. So, anyway, this is what we have to console ourselves with now. There are people that are just in the Lords who don't... Well, there's always been people in the Lords that don't deserve to be there. They should all be hereditary. But that's by the by. The position we found ourselves in politically is simply untenable. We have had nothing short of disaster governments basically since David Cameron. Since Gordon Brown, actually. I'm not giving Gordon Brown that. Tony Blair's was bad as well, actually, in the end. But I know too many people that sing the praise of Blair from before I was even kind of aware of anything, given I was like 2 at the time. You tell me that Tony Blair's early premiership was actually very, very good. From the sounds of it, it's because he didn't actually do a lot in his first term. Amazingly, when you don't do a lot, people actually seem to like you. It's kind of weird that in politics, and nobody seems to pick up on it. In fact, no, Boris Johnson at first, all he was in there to do was to get Brexit done and not actually do much else. People liked him. And then COVID happened, and then he did everything, and everyone hates him. There's a lesson to be learned here, and no politician currently is going to learn that, which is why we need a completely new political ecosystem, but I can't see it changing basically until people take voting seriously, which barely anyone does, hence we get useless people in. But anyway, it's by the by. This video is all about Sue Gray and how she was a disaster. I think I've covered that enough. Let's just bask in this win that it is. Let's hope that his team are as useless as she was, and let's hope it's Starmer himself who is seen as the problem soon, before it's too late and he ruins the country. Okay, he'll get replaced with Angela Rayner more than likely. However, I find that even better, because she will completely ruin the country. And if that's not the end of Clown Decade, then I'm with everyone else who's leaving the country. I will find a way to leave it, because then there is definitely no hope. But anyway, that's everything I had for you today. So, shilling time, Monday, we are starting a new series of the geopolitics of antiquity. Jack is doing another one of his lectures. If you really enjoyed the mistakes of British foreign policy in the 19th century, you will absolutely love this, because ancient Rome and ancient Greece are Jack's babies. He absolutely loves the subject, so it's going to be great again. Tomorrow, we will be doing a Tosh Talks. The topic we have finally chosen will be being right-wing and anti-Farage is practically useless. It's self-destructive, it's not helpful. So we'll be covering that topic. No stream Wednesday, but Thursday I will be on Proper Horror Shows, double feature horror show, where we will be covering the film Teeth. I am not looking forward to it. I think it's going to disgust me, but she asked me politely to watch it, so I will and review it. So please come along to that as well. And then finally, Saturday, it's Laughing at the Guardian. We will be having Tori Russell, Tharium, and someone from the community called Saro, a new guy, so be nice to him, I know I will. And, you know, if you ever feel like you want to be part of the Worcester Club, or, you know, my community as well, obviously the comments are a good place to start, but there are also Discords down below. I would highly suggest both of them. Worcester Club is where I'm more active on, but that's a bit more serious. And then obviously there is the Drunken Duck run by my girlfriend, where it's there really just for good vibes. So there you go. Right, with that, that's everything I had for you today. Please do subscribe, become a member, even leave super thanks. I forgot that you could leave me money in the comments, but you can do that as well if you think I deserve it. But if not, no worries at all. So with that, that's everything I had for you today. Once again, thank you very much for watching, and until next time, goodbye.